This is The Weekly Set, the official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com. Episode 197, recorded March 9th, 2019. Hello everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I am your host, my name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello. So,
today, we are going to be talking about The Magicians, Season 4, Episode 7, The Side Effects. So, starting things off, this episode's really about the framing device almost more than anything else. Like, it's addressing stuff in the story, but it's not necessarily going too far past events we've already seen. It's kind of showing some little bits we haven't seen and stuff, but it's mostly, this episode seems to be mostly about the framing device, which is, Penny, not Penny 23, but the Penny who's dead and works in the underworld library.
I'm gonna call him Underworld Penny.
Underpen.
Underpen. That works.
That's his superhero name,
It's an interesting framing device, yeah, because Penny's got this guy in front of him who also works for the library in the underworld. And
a bit of a douche nozzle. He is, as far as presented, a straight white male. And that is important to point that out because of the framing device and what the framing device is trying to say. Yes.
Because Penny is kind of giving him a test, like saying, you know, he's having him read everybody's books, and basically, like, he's asking, you know, like, what questions, like, you know, what's the point of the story? Where's the story going? And
initially guys like, oh, well, clearly Quentin's the lead character, and, you know, there's a will they, won't they with Alice, and everybody else is a side character and really unimportant.
Yes. And then Underworld Penny is like, are you sure about that? And he's like, well, yeah, Quentin's the one with all the connections to everybody. You know, Quentin's the one who knows everything about Fillory, so it's obvious. And then Penny's like, you only think that because he looks like you. and then he kind of protests. He goes, no, I mean, Todd looks like me too, and he ain't the center of shit.
Poor Todd.
Yeah.
At least Josh had sex with Margot.
But Penny uses it to make the point that you have to look at the story from other people's perspectives, from Margot's perspective, from Julia's perspective, you know, from all kinds, you know.
Even Zelda, the head librarian.
Yeah, from Katie's perspective, especially. And Katie is a character we haven't seen for 2 episodes now. So she comes back in a big way in this episode.
Well, Katie's like, her biggest thing kicks off with one of my favorite lines in the episode, which is she gets visited by the Baba Yaga, possessing a witch, and comes in with this like gritty voice, and the greatest line, which is, you reek of non-dairy creamer and despair.
Yeah. Yeah, the Baba Yaga. Because apparently, like, because the apartment Katie's in is
Marina's old apartment,
it's under protection, but the Baba Yaga is protecting it, and she requires, like any landlord, rent. But her rent isn't a simple monetary transaction. It's something a lot. She wants rare, hard to get, valuable things.
Yeah, there's 3 things on her list that she wants for that month's rent or whatever. The first they already have in the office. So she just is like, oh, is this it? Yeah, okay, that's easy. The second is anybody who's ever played Dungeons and Dragons or is even mildly aware of the culture around Dungeons and Dragons would know is a bag of holding.
Yeah, to which Katie replies, I don't do nerd shit.
Yeah. It's a bit excessive on that. It's like, come on, everybody's heard of that, you know? Yeah, and then
Katie obviously has heard of Dungeons and Dragons, but she's obviously not the type of person who's going to be into that.
Yeah, and then the last one is there's a creepy doll with healing tears.
Yes.
So those are the items you have to find. So that's like the majority of Katie's story is trying to find these, and that kind of leads into like the rest of her story, because she finds the bag of holding. There's a kind of cool bartering scene where she goes around and she barters, and she ends up with, I think it's either H.P. Lovecraft or Aleister Crowley Crowley's like ashes. I can't remember.
I think it's Aleister Crowley's. I'd have to rewatch the episode to be sure.
Anyways, it's a famous occult writer figure's ashes. And she ends up being able to trade for that, to get the bag of holding. For the creepy doll, they get like a lead in like the weirdest way. Like the guy that she's with or whatever, looking for it, this hedge witch guy, he's basically just drinking with this perfectly normal guy, seemingly unrelated to the world, and ends up finding a clue through him that he knows a guy who happens to have that doll. They track it down, they go inside the guy's house, and he's dead. And he's got some kind of a weird rash or something, and they find the doll, and initially you're like, oh shit, like this doll has some kind of a side effect to it, like the title of the episode, the side effect, and it's like, it's causing people to die and stuff. But that's not it, because when they find the dead body, the guy that's with, Katie ends up finding this coin on him. It's like, he takes it and he's like, oh, well, he doesn't need it, he's dead anyway, so it doesn't matter. I think it's a Dewey, isn't it? It's one of the Deweys.
Yeah. It's a Dewey, but these Deweys are actually enchanted with a spell.
A locator spell, yeah.
A locator spell by the library. So it's like the library is trying to trick these hedge witches by letting them access these Deweys that have this locator spell.
Mm-hmm. And it turns out that this is what's causing the side effect that's killing hedge witches, but it's not like an intentional thing. It's not like this is what the library wants to do.
So it's complicated because they're enchanted with the locator spell. Hedge witches, they're not formally trained in magic like magicians who go to break bills, so hedge witches kind of like patch together spells that they learn on their own.
Ghetto magic.
Yeah, somebody says ghetto magic. And so they've enchanted themselves with these spells that they've figured out on their own, and it's not the best magic in the world, and it's very easy for, if they come into like a contact with another spell that messes with the magic, it could have dramatic effects, and that's what happens with this locator spell, which it messes with the protection spell that these hedge witches have been using to keep themselves hidden.
Yes. And that's causing hedge witches to die. So it's not just this one hedge witch that has died. Apparently several more have passed away as well. From the same basic locator token on the locator spell on the Dewey that they've acquired, and it's caused this effect and killed a bunch of them. So, Katie ends up getting together with like a bunch of the hedge witches and to like explain the situation and tell them not to watch the magics they're using and to stay away from these Deweys because they're, explaining why these hedge witches are dying, basically, what's causing this. And some of the hedge witches are like, one of them directly references, which is a tie-in to last week's episode, like, oh, I heard that there's a pipe that's leaking magic in Modesto.
Yeah.
We could go and we could get revenge or something. And Katie's like, no, are you stupid? If you go and try to get revenge, it's going to give them a reason to target us and they're going to come after us. And so Katie seemingly handles it here, but we know from last week's episode that that's not the case, because that's the girl that ended up showing up with the other hedge witch and blowing up that location of the library, which we see kind of the after effects of in this episode. Like, we don't see her blow it up again, but we see the library reacting to the fact that the location was blown up.
Yeah. So they're looking for these hedge witches who are responsible.
Yes. And so they're going further with this spell idea that was actually Zelda's idea to do this location spell, this locator spell, but, they're going further with it, and she's, because of the side effects, she's more like, we need to stop this, and because of the hedge witches blowing up the thing, the hedge witches are like, we need to expand this.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, you see like a split starting with Zelda and the rest of the librarians. But, we should jump back just a second because there's one thing we forgot with, Katie's story. And, that's that part of why she's like, getting this jump on getting involved with the hedge witches and warning them about this and being involved is that where all the rest of the characters, once the spell was undone and they had their identities back, they like were quick to shed off like their old identities and just not even deal with them at all. The only like consequence thing we've seen that has anything to do with like the former identities so far has been Josh with the whole quickening thing.
Yeah.
With the fact that he had sex with that woman when he didn't know he had this magical STD.
Right.
So that's like the only consequence related to that we'd seen so far. But now we see it again because Katie is feeling like a loss of purpose. Like, you know, her Penny, the regular underworld Underpen, as we've decided to call him, he is dead. And that was kind of a big part of her purpose was that. And then it was trying to get magic back and there's all these other kind of things. But then as Sam, she had purpose because she was like a detective. So she was like helping people. And so we haven't seen her in a while and she answers what she's been doing in that time, which is she's been like going over cases that she wasn't able to solve and using magic to solve them. And so that, the reason that's important is it shows Katie's motivation, why she's involved with the Hedge Witches at all in this, why she didn't just pass the message along and leave it be, why she actually gathered them all and has been more involved in this, you know?
Right.
Is that she's got this need for purpose. So kind of like the next storyline we have to go over is, maybe with, let's talk about Fen and Margot and Josh and that whole group.
Yeah, so Fen is actually the next focus, because we go back to Margot's story, but we're looking at events from Fen's point of view. Mm-hmm. And what we find out is Fen is actually having dreams, but they're more than dreams, they're like visions of the future because she's dreaming stuff that ends up happening.
She is touched by prophecy, you could say.
And basically, she finds this out. She confides in Josh. Eventually, she confides in Josh about what's going on with her. Josh suggests that she could try a technique called lucid dreaming, where
she could take control within her dream.
She could take control within her dream when she thinks something is a dream. It culminates into like the scene where Margot is pouring the alpaca blood. I think that's what it's supposed to be. It's the
potion made from the alpaca stuff, whatever, in order to... Okay,
yeah, I wasn't like quite sure, like...
In order to give voices back to the animals.
Yeah, she's pouring it on the lizard, her birthright lizard, to get to be able to talk again, but she pours it on it and it explodes and catches fire.
It turns into like a beam of light.
Turns into a beam of light. And then we find out that then Fen does her lucid dreaming and we find out like it's a dream. And so there's somebody in a green robe running around in Fen's dream.
Which all we catch on to is that it's a woman.
Yeah.
Or at least Fen thinks it's a woman. And, so she ends up basically in that actual situation where they're about to actually do this, not in her dream, but like in reality. And she's trying to stop them. And Margot's like, what the fuck? You saw it in a dream and I'm supposed to stop this, you know? And Josh kind of backs her up and eventually they kind of go, okay, fine. We'll lay off. We won't use this potion on the lizard. And they start getting interested in like who this actual person is. And Fen references like one of the funny things is she references that like where the location was. I can't remember what it was called, but the location that she had chased this green cloaked woman through in her lucid dream. And like when they say the name of it, the one guy that's like married to the sloth or whatever, it like gasps. And he's like, oh, that location, also known as Sloth's Nightmare or something.
Something ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just so funny because when he gasps, it's like, oh shit, what's going on? He knows something, and it's just this.
Yeah, it's Sloth's Nightmare.
But yeah, I mean that's pretty much Fen's storyline is that she's got this kind of premonition thing going on, and we have this new player, this woman in a green cloak that we don't know.
Around Fen's dream, apparently causing these premonitions.
Likely, it's one of the main characters in the show.
Yeah,
that like from like some different future or something. You know, that's probably what it is. It's probably like Margot or something. You know, like but from the future. Or, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's kind of the way this show has done stuff like that before. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where that goes. I already touched a little bit on Zelda, the head librarian, but that's kind of like the third storyline of the episode, pretty much.
Yeah, Zelda is like the third person that we focus on this episode, and we really only focus on these three people. Katie, Zelda, and Ben.
Yeah, besides Elliot, who's the actual framing device, and there's stuff to talk about there too, like later.
But Zelda's story is like she comes to believe that her daughter is not actually dead. Like she didn't die when she went into the mirror and the mirror exploded like we thought. She's starting to see her daughter in the mirror, and she comes to believe through this that her daughter isn't dead. So she wants to go into the in-between, the mirror realm, what have you, to try and rescue her.
So she uses the library's like personal traveler.
Yeah, the library personal traveler. He's telling her it's insane. Like they're basically telling her, no, she's crazy. There's no way that's, that her daughter is alive, that's even a thing. Like, you're crazy for even attempting it. But she convinces them to let her do it. She convinces the library's traveler to take her.
Mm-hmm. And we get a little bit of nightmare fuel here.
Well, because she does get into the mirror world, and she does find her daughter, but it turns
in quotation marks, yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing air quotes. That nobody can see. But she finds her daughter, and it's not really her daughter. It's a monster masquerading as her daughter. And
yeah, it's a bit of like body horror nightmare fuel with like the weird smile thing on the side of the face, or
the sharp teeth. Like this is like some nasty shit. And so her traveler, he gets attacked. And he begs her that, like, he's like, oh, we gotta leave, and she's like, no, I know my daughter is actually down here somewhere. I gotta stay here and find her. And it's like, well, you're fucking nuts, cause you're gonna die and I'm gonna die if we stay here.
They end up leaving.
Well, they end up leaving, yeah.
We should also note on her storyline as well, they have the whole thing where they're dealing with Alice having escaped and Santa escaping as well.
Yes, they're dealing with Santa and Alice.
I love the one librarian who just keeps cracking up every time they're talking about Santa. And she's like, I knew I saw a sleigh. But anyways, yeah, so they're dealing with the escape of them. They end up finding Alice's book that we know, she'd had, Pullover and her had done, the magic on to make like a fake narrative so that they think that she's in Portland. That Alice is in Portland doing she's given up on magic and she's just wants to live a normal life in Portland. And so the library kind of sends Zelda to check on her after the events of this horror in the mirror world. She goes and she goes to Portland where her job is, and she checks in, and the guy's like, no, I've never heard of this Alice person. And so Zelda realizes at this point, like, oh wait, okay, she somehow tricked the books. And, we know at this point, Zelda, this is like also after the whole bit with, where they find out about the side effects. So this is like when she's starting to kind of have like some, second thoughts about what the library is doing.
Right.
So she comes out of there and she's with that traveler, the library's traveler, and she is like, oh yeah, I saw her there. She's just doing what, she's supposed to be doing. Nothing big. Let's go. And the guy's like, yeah, let's get some donuts. Which the joke is, if you've heard of Portland, it's supposed to be like a big donut capital.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
There's a lot of like really famous donut places in Portland. So he's like, we're in Portland, let's get donuts, But that's pretty much it for the majority of her storyline, except that just at the very end, I should say, where we follow Alice. And she's going to talk to Dean Fogg, and she's talking about how her friend has disappeared. Her friend who we'd seen in the last episode that she was teaching some magic to, the one that helped open up the pipe for magic in Modesto. And she's like, the librarians have taken her, you need to help me. And Dean Fogg opens the door the rest of the way, and sitting right inside side is Zelda. And Alice immediately gets up on her guard, but Zelda's like, no, I need to talk to you. I need your help or something. So we see at this point, this seems to be Zelda breaking her allegiance to the library at this point.
Yeah.
But we don't know. It's what they're playing up to at this point. She's already lied to them about where Alice is and stuff.
Yeah, that's what they're playing up to, because Zelda, it seems, because Zelda's got her own motivation now that's separate from the library. Zelda truly deeply believes that her daughter is alive in this mirror realm. She tried to go in and save her herself, but there's these creatures, she was unable to do it, so now it makes sense she's asking for Alice's help in doing this.
She's also upset about the whole thing with the locator spells and the side effects. And
because she finds out about the locator spells and the side effects, and she doesn't agree with it, but the head of the order that she's talking is like, but it might not actually be such a bad thing, right? And she's like, of course, it's a horrible thing. What are you talking about? So she's at odds with them on that too, yeah.
So basically this is the start of Zelda regurgitating the Kool-Aid.
Yes.
That's pretty much it for the main three storylines, but back to the framing device. This guy that's kind of this douche that Penny's been trying to kind of teach that, about other people being important characters as well.
Right, because Penny's whole thing was like, if you only view the story through one person's lens, you only get part of the story. And you don't necessarily get a sense for where the story is going, but when you look at the story from different perspectives, you see different angles, and you can see different angles of the story and better see where the story is actually headed.
It's funny because Quentin is in this episode, but just long enough to say, I'm going to go check Rina's library. And that's it.
Exactly.
Which is a funny play on the whole idea that, he's the main character and all the other characters are side characters. And he's in the episode for a grand total of 30 seconds.
30 seconds, yeah.
He has one line of dialogue and leaves, which I thought was really funny, and intentional.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Penny's trying to convince this guy of this, goes through this whole thing. He finally breaks it down in such a way that is okay, this is it. This is the final lesson from it. And then it's revealed that this guy he's been talking to this whole time is much older than he is. He actually died in the Crusades.
Yeah, he's been there. He's been down there for ages.
And he's the supervisor of Penny's supervisor.
Yeah. And basically it turns around, it's flipped around because it's revealed that this was a test for Penny,
yes.
And Penny passed the test with flying colors. And he also remarks, it's like, oh yeah, well they like to send a white dude like me to administer the test because they like the irony of it.
He also gives Penny a new position, which is now Penny is in charge of secrets taken to the grave.
Yes.
That's his new position. And then the very end of the episode is with Penny. We see him and he's walking down a hallway and he goes to a door that's opening up and he's welcoming somebody to the underworld that he's familiar with. He says, he makes some comment about haven't seen you in a while. Welcome to the underworld.
Yeah.
So the idea is somebody died.
Yes.
We just don't know who.
But it's somebody Penny knows.
Yes.
So that's interesting. It's interesting where that go. It's good that we're getting original Penny back. We're getting a storyline with original Penny. I didn't think they were going to do anything with him after he went down to the underworld, and they essentially replaced him with an alternate universe version of himself. So
it's been so long that we've been with just Penny 23.
Yeah.
You forget how different those two versions of Penny are.
And it's awesome that we're now getting a new storyline with the old Penny and that they didn't just outright replace him with a different version of him and say that's that.
Yeah. Penny 23 isn't replacing Penny. It's they're two separate characters.
Yeah.
I even put that in my show notes here, when I have the names of characters, I have Penny 23 and Penny as separate characters.
Separate character because they are very different. And it wasn't this episode, it was last episode, but last episode really highlighted that when they got the two versions of Penny in a room together interacting, you really clarified how different they were from each other.
Which is cool because it is like, it did feel like they were just outright replacing Penny with it's like, oh, well, they killed off Penny, but they still want Penny, so they have Penny from a different dimension. But It's cool that they've kind of done this whole thing where, the first thing they did obviously was the fact that, if it was just going to be like a replacement, then he'd have also had a relationship with Katie in the other dimension. And so obviously Penny 23 and Katie would be together, and that would resolve her losses, and it would get you past that point. And so that's like the first thing they did to kind of really differentiate them.
Because this doesn't resolve that because a version of Penny came back, but he's not interested in Katie at all. He's interested in Julia.
Yes.
Who he was in love with in his dimension.
Yes, and that is just part of what highlights him as being different enough that Katie, who was initially so psyched to see him and was like, oh my God, Penny's back, and she was like wanting to move on with things, has now come to the point where she realized that no, she had to start mourning. And she was kind of unwilling to mourn up until that point. So it was like, they brought in Penny 23, this is all last season stuff, but they brought in Penny 23 as like this replacement to Penny seemingly, and she went from going like, okay, that means I don't have to mourn him, I have Penny back, to realizing that this is the point where she actually does have to mourn him. Not that it gave her back a chance not to mourn him, but that she had never committed to mourning him until that.
Right.
So that was like the first kind of interesting thing they did. And then when they actually brought them together and really kind of played on that idea, and now what they're doing with Penny actually having, in the underworld, having an actual story. I didn't think when they brought Penny back, like last episode, I thought it was just for that scene where he was going to give Penny 23 guidance and then he was going to slip back. But yeah, they're giving him a storyline now. It's really cool. I love it. It's funny because like it almost feels like, oh wow, they brought Penny back like it's this big deal. It's like, well, they've had the actor there the whole time. But you're so used to just the character being different that it's almost like, oh, they even brought back Penny. It's like, well, he's been there the whole time. The actor has. So all they had to do was write the dialogue for him, write the story for him. But it's funny because that's how effective it is with the two Pennies being different, that you kind of subconsciously forget that, So your gut reaction is like, oh wow, they're bringing Penny back, like I've missed this actor that's been here this whole time. So yeah, it's pretty funny. But Magicians continues to be good, continues to be fun, continues to have great lines like you reek of non-dairy creamer and despair. I don't think we saw not Elliot or Elliot in this whole episode, did we? He wasn't in it at all. And like I said, Quentin just had that brief, 30-second moment.
If he was, I completely forgot everything about that scene. So.
And then Julia only had a moment with Katie that the only purpose was basically to point out Katie's struggle with her past identity and the difference between that and with somebody else. That was like Julia's only purpose in this episode.
Yeah, Julia's only purpose was Julia was trying to remind Katie that, she's there for her and stuff. And Katie's like, yeah, well, I got my own path and I gotta walk it. So, bye-bye.
And we also got some, we got some Margot and Josh, but only through Fenn's perspective.
Yeah, it was all through Fenn's perspective. Like I said, this episode was focused on 3 character perspectives. 4 technically, because he had Penny. It was focused on Fenn, Zelda, Katie, and Penny.
And they reduced the true protagonist of the story down to a joke. Todd.
Yeah, Todd. Yeah, exactly.
The true protagonist.
When Todd is connected to everything. He is the key to everything.
It's the key to the whole story.
Which we will find out.
So yeah, but that's it for the episode. We'll talk about this again next week as well. This is basically all we're going to be talking about until Game of Thrones starts. We have the 200th episode coming up, so we'll do something for that that's outside of all this. But otherwise, this is what we're going to be talking about until Game of Thrones comes back. So the podcast episodes might be a little bit shorter, like they were when we were doing The Good Place. So maybe half hour or something like that. But, we'll talk about next week's episode next week. Until then, here's what's coming up in the week ahead. We're recording this on Saturday, the 9th of March. But, on Friday, March 8th, Tin Star came to Amazon Prime. Made in Heaven also came to Amazon Prime. Afterlife, which is the new Ricky Gervais series, came to Netflix. two series called Bangkok Love Stories hit Netflix. One's called Bangkok Love Stories Hey You, and the other one's called Bangkok Love Stories Innocent. So they're like separate mini-series.
Bangkok Love Stories Let's Go Pikachu and Bangkok Love Stories.
Bangkok Love Stories Three Houses.
Yeah.
So, Hey You, Pikachu, and Innocence Eevee.
Yeah.
Also, The Immortals came to Netflix, and Shadow came to Netflix. That was on Friday. This Sunday, March 10th, 2019, American Gods is back on Starz. So this could be a real clusterfuck. As we know, at the end of season 1,
reviews have been bad so far.
Yeah,
looking at the reviews, and they've been bad.
I'm definitely going to watch it, if only to see the train wreck.
Yeah.
But basically, Brian Fuller and Green, can't remember his name. His last name's Green, though, the other showrunner. Yeah, the two of them left towards the beginning of season 1. They'd apparently written something like the first 7 episodes, but like production, I think hadn't even started yet, and they left because of disputes, creative differences, money, stuff like that. So they split.
From what I heard, it was mostly money. It was mostly money because what Brian Fuller wanted to do was too expensive for what they were willing to pay for the show.
Yeah.
So, they wanted him to, tone it down and make it cheaper, and he was kind of unwilling to do that, so he just left.
Yeah, he and his partner, the showrunners, they took off. When they left, Gillian Anderson, who plays Media, also left.
Yeah.
In support of them. The new showrunner was a Brian Fuller alumni, somebody who'd worked with him. I think they'd worked with him on both Hannibal and Pushing Daisies. So it's a writer that had worked with him before. So it still seemed like, okay, maybe it's still in good hands.
Yeah, but he's gone.
and yeah, he took off. I think soon after, or they fired him basically. He didn't leave voluntarily. When they were basically just about getting through the material that Fuller and Green had written.
Yeah.
So they were at about that point in production, and then they just banned him from the set. And the editors banned. We're like, no, you can't come back here. And then basically the channel just took over the show, which isn't a good sign. So all of this is a bad sign. Early reviews, Will said, are not too kind. As much as we could just write this off and say this is going to be, obviously means it's going to be shit. I mean, this kind of stuff's happened before to shows that have long since outlasted that. I mean, The Walking Dead's on season 8 or 9, and people are starting to get sick of it, but
a show losing its showrunner isn't always a big deal. The Walking Dead lost
Walking Dead had a disaster almost just like this around season 2, season 3.
Oh no, The Walking Dead lost its original showrunner after season 1.
No, it happened in the middle of season 2.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it was before they filmed, but they had already started writing season 2. It was just like this, basically.
Yeah, it was just like this. But it's not,
And it's the same thing. It was money, too. It was that they wanted more money. This is before Walking Dead was a massive hit. And the original showrunner believed it was going to be a massive hit, and the network wasn't so sure, so they wanted to cut budgets. And season 2 was kind of a bit of an uneven season. A lot of people were sick of the location for that season.
To be honest, the stuff that came after the original showrunner left was probably some of the strongest material in the series.
Exactly, because it happened around season 3 or season 4. They actually started really putting in on the budget.
Yeah.
And the new showrunners that they had brought in, because they went through again, just like with this, they went through a number of showrunners in a very short period of time. They were basically trying to figure it out. How do we get this working? How do we get this working? They kept firing people, restructuring, and they ended up kind of finding their groove a season or 2 later. So this doesn't necessarily mean that American Gods is DOA. I mean, Neil Gaiman's still attached. He's still involved in it, and it's based on his work. So there's still a chance. I say all of that also knowing that Brian Fuller is probably Will and mine's our favorite showrunner.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman's so attached, although Neil Gaiman has been public in his desire that he didn't want to have to be the showrunner showrunner for this, you know, he did.
Yeah, he's more involved as a producer. He's still not running it. He actually ran Good Omens, which is coming out soon to Amazon.
Nice.
But yeah, it's kind of a clusterfuck, kind of a disaster, but we won't really know until we're seeing it, you know? Like, we don't know how much of the original scripts they're using, how much has been changed, stuff like that. And we might never know completely how much has changed from what it was going to be. I'm definitely going to tune in. I really liked American Gods in the first season. I'm not expecting a lot now. Like, my hype for the show is just completely dwindled, but I'm still going to check it out. And that's on Sunday, March 10th. Also on that same day, Now Apocalypse comes to Starz. That's going to be like, so they're pairing those two shows together. Now Apocalypse is from, I can't remember the guy's name. He's a good director. He did a movie called Mysterious Skin, I think, that was really good. And so this is kind of like this weird, dark, ethereal, surreal kind of show or something about modern life. I don't know. Anyways, that's Now Apocalypse. That's coming on there. Check that out. And then HBO has the case against Adnan Syed, which, if you've ever heard of the podcast Serial, that was about the case about this guy, Adnan Syed, who is accused of murdering his girlfriend, and he's in prison for the crime. And it's kind of like investigating if he really did it. Well, Serial was like this podcast that really blew up and became this huge cultural phenomenon. The case against Adnan Syed on HBO is kind of like a continuation of that almost. It's like picking up years later with more information and stuff. So that's going to be kind of an interesting thing that you're probably going to hear a lot of people talking about it again. So if you're suddenly like, is everybody talking about Serial again? That's because of this coming to HBO. Then on Tuesday, March 12th, 2019, Terrace House returns to Netflix. On Wednesday, March 13th, Empire returns to Fox, as does Star. It's going to be interesting because Empire is the show with that one dude that just got arrested for faking.
That whole thing.
So, and he's in it.
Yeah.
He's in like these first couple episodes that are coming back. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how people react to that.
Yes, that's going to be interesting for sure.
Because people are not happy with him. Then on Thursday, March 14th, The Good Fight returns to CBS All Access. This is, of course, the sequel series to The Good Wife, about lawyers and stuff. It's got Rose Leslie, Kit Harington's wife, who played the wildling that he fell in love with in Game of Thrones. So she's in that. CBS All Access. This is the main show they have besides Star Trek. So if you got CBS All Access for Star Trek, stick around and see if you like The Good Fight too.
If you got Star Trek All Access for Star Trek, then it also has this show,
which is not Star Trek.
Yeah.
But it's got a girl from Game of Thrones in it. And then on Friday, March 15th, 2019, Shrill comes to Hulu. Catastrophe returns to Amazon Prime. If I Hadn't Met You comes to Netflix. Love, Death, and Robots comes to Netflix. That show looks good. It's like an anthology series, like an animated anthology series dealing with robots and stuff like that.
Looks alright.
The trailers for it look really cool. Like, if nothing else, the trailers are like almost like a short film upon themselves. Mafia Dolls comes to Netflix as well. Turn Up Charlie, which is the new series from Idris Elba, who you might know as the person who should have been the Black Batman. He is actually, what's the character's name in Thor? The one with that controls the Bifrost.
I can't remember. I know Heimdall.
Yes. Heimdall from the Thor movies. That's his new series, Turn Up Charlie, on Netflix. And also the second half of the most recent season of Arrested Development returns on Netflix.
Did you hear the rumor about Idris Elba? James Gunn is recasting Deadshot with Idris Elba instead of Will Smith.
Yes, which is
like a huge,
a more interesting actor.
Exactly.
People were like, oh no, Will Smith leaving, and that might be a hit for the movie as far as the attention, just because Will Smith's a bigger name than Idris Elba. But Idris Elba's a much more interesting actor.
Much more interesting actor, yeah. And I trust James Gunn. I think James Gunn has good instincts about these things, so.
Yeah. But that'll be interesting. And like I said, and then lastly, on that same day, on March 15th, the second half of the most recent season of Arrested Development hits Netflix. Wow, that show took a nosedive as far as like popularity and reception.
Like anything of that show aside from like maybe a couple episodes from the first season.
Yeah, people are not happy with the show since it's come to Netflix.
Yeah, I guess. Like,
in particular, this last season, which they split this last season in half, and we're getting the second half of that season now.
Oh, yeah.
But the first half, people were not happy with it all.
It's kind of a thing like, you know, be careful what you wish for. Like, you might think like, oh, it sucks your favorite show is dead and it's never come back, but then it could come back and suck.
Yeah. This is the, Arrested Development for Netflix is the official warning to all fans of Firefly.
Yeah. Firefly, you know, like, it could come back, but Joss Whedon could be drunk and coked out of his mind and it will suck.
Fun fact, Joss Whedon has a show coming up on HBO in the next couple of years that called The Nevers that actually it's very like Buffy-esque.
Yeah, I was gonna say it sounds like a Joss Whedon show. Like if you read the plot line and everything, you read that and you go, "Yep, that's a Joss Whedon show."
And he's not just like when it first got announced, it seemed like, oh, he's just gonna attach his name to it, but no, he's straight up show running it. So
yeah, this is the first show he's show running since I think Dollhouse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one is much more Joss Whedon-esque than Dollhouse was.
Yeah.
This one is right in line with like Buffy and stuff.
It's weird to say because Dollhouse was completely like an invention of Joss Whedon that he wrote, directed, you know, show ran. Like that
but he made it basically for Eliza Dushku.
Yeah, it was
because she was taking so many shitty roles and he wanted to give her something better.
Yeah. Yeah, he made it for her.
Yeah. But that's it. That's what's coming up in the week ahead. Next week on the podcast, we're going to continue talking about the Magicians.
Yay. And it's going to be interesting because we might find out like who that guy Penny talking to was. Or we might find out what happens with Zelda and her daughter.
There's lots of like little loose threads hanging out right now that are interesting.
But we'll probably get more screen time with Quentin next episode.
Yes, the main character returns.
And the main character of the series. Undisputed main character.
Yes. You can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can reach Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can contact us through those or just by contacting contact at thetitlescreen.com. Sorry. Messing that up. If you want to, get some comments on the podcast or something, that's some ways you can reach us. You can check out our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, as well as our site, thetitlescreen.com. You can subscribe to this podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast, and the entire backlog of the podcast is available on our YouTube channel. You can find the links to all of that to our, SoundCloud page where we have the podcast posted up and the RSS feed for the podcast so you can subscribe to it. The links to all of our YouTube and Facebook, all of our social channels, all of that you can find on our site, thetitlescreen.com. So thank you everybody for listening. See you next week. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetitlescreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best